Where are my notes? ACT conference. Trainer credentialing. So I've started a file, and oh, there's Brian too. Good. Okay. Even more of the right people are here. And you probably may or may not know this, that Brian was the first employee I hired at my ropes course, probably about 1985 or 1986. So he showed up with a state of Vermont group, and I didn't have enough staffing. And so he started working without, his interview was, can you belay? So yes, those stories are true. So, yeah, but hell
with credentialing.
That's it. No, I'm a big fan of it. So here's kind of the premise, and I'll front load this as we get into it with, a larger effort, but probably about 2000, Cindy Walker and Andrew Hubert in ACT led a committee to rewrite the ACT operational standards with an intention of preparing the way for practitioner certification. And Jan Panicucci from PA, Bill Zimmerman from the Climbing Wall Association, and some other people, we were all on that committee. And then about late 2003 or 2004 at the conference, Tim Kemp of Adventure Experience, he's passed away at this point, but basically that the ACT had a conversation at the summer meeting in Taylor Park, and it was just about this whole thing of practitioner certification. And then in January at the conference, basically said, we're going to do it. Tim and Cindy came to me because they knew I was interested, and they said, would you like to be the chair? And then Cindy said, well, you need to be on the board to do this. So I ran for the board reluctantly. And so I ended up as the chair of the certification committee. And what Tim said to us was that we needed to create a certification that was a good template for what needed to happen, and it needed to be accepted as valid in the industry. And he said at that same time, he said, don't worry about the trainers, just ignore it. But in order to answer Tim's question of, to create a viable certification that was seen as valid, our committee we had to justify who the trainers were in order to justify facilitators, certification. And we've never done that. And so in the standards, in the second draft standards for certification, there's a whole section in here on trainer credentialing and the vote. And then in Boston, we met, and there was a big to-do around the trainer thing in there. People didn't like it. They didn't like it was there. And I think it's because they didn't want anybody looking over their shoulder at their trainers. But they basically pulled it out of certification. And then what we'd had designed to be a kind of an incremental system, you leave level 2 and then you end up headed towards trainer, boom, that whole piece was removed. The QCP, as you know it today, came out of our effort. And we did this, and they said, well, let's create a document. And then they built up this QCP thing. So, 2007 to 2022, they finally made a step last year to do the curriculum, a trainer's curriculum or something like that we've still never really seen. They still haven't released it. So nothing's really happened, but I think that we're right at a tipping point. Or said another way, I think we're at critical mass now, where I think people are like, okay, I think we're ready to take this next step. So I'm not waiting anymore. I'm getting old. I've waited long enough. And so I'm starting this effort, and I announced it to Carson. And I said, we're gonna have some meetings in the meantime with just people, just trainers, and then we'll approach ACT and say, here's the form. We'd like to start this process. Here's our proposal. Can we form a whatever the group is called kind of thing? So, but what I my thought is that, today what we could do is to kind of start together and just kind of the four of us to just kind of talk a little bit. And what the model that I started with, opened a mural. This is the second mural I've ever created. Just not my first. I did that for a school group a couple weeks ago with Becca. So I thought we would, have everybody do their little name tag. I guess I need to send you guys the thing. So let me do that. Copy, chat. Boom. Here's the link to the mural. And the mural is not, there's nothing locked in about this yet. So be careful. But I figured for us, I didn't really need to worry about locking it down, except for Brian would say we'd need to lock it for him. But my thought then is that, if you guys want to leave a tag here, because I will use the same template and we'll add to it. But we leave our tags here so that people can then basically add to it. So if the next time I gather with people, if you're not there, your mark will still be there, and I'll make sure that everybody in our process has access to this, that they can work on it. They can add to it at any time. After every session, I'll lock stuff down so that people can't change what somebody else has written, but they can add to it. And John can help me with that. So that's kind of where I am with it. And I wonder, just, checking in with you too, what do you guys think? Well, let me tell you this then. The other part in my process, my other thought then was to, on the right side of that mural, it says, what are the questions needed to be answered? And I think that that's what was certification. We started with questions. Should there be a certification for practitioners? I mean, just, we were headed there, but we still, it was interesting. Like, well, why do we need to ask this? We could just go forward. But the process of answering the question was a really cool conversation. Yes, Leslie.
First of all, Tom, I always appreciate your history, because I think when we know what's been done, we can more effectively move forward. So one, thank you. And two, for me, it's not what are the questions that need to be answered. For me, it's what are the things that are preventing or hindering us from doing something, and or what is the reason to do or not do something, right? And so what I look at is like, the standard is inadequate to tell us what to do, right? Like the standard, there's not a minimum reference, right? Literally, I have it open and it says, I had it. It says the training shall be conducted by a qualified person. That is all it says. And then you read, but however, I will say there was significant effort into defining a qualified person, which I think is pretty good. And it says an individual who by possession of a recognized degree, which if you have an adult education degree and you want to conduct trainings, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? You still need to be a subject matter expert, but sure, right? Certificate. Okay, well, I don't know a lot of people who are certified, but if you have some sort of certificate, great. Or professional standing, which to me is like professional engineer. So we don't have right now an industry professional standing. All right. So basically you have to have a degree or someone has to certify you, or by extensive knowledge, training, and experience. Right now, I think a lot of people rest on that. But I think if you're resting on that, you need to then defer to the QCP document. However, I think the QCP document has a major flaw, and that is experience before training. And you'll say, no, the QCP requires you to attend trainings. And I'm like, but not on being a trainer. It basically says, have trainings of this random assortment, and then have a lot of experience. And if you look at any other industry, lifeguarding, first responders, plumbers, electrician, it doesn't matter what the industry is. I've never worked in an industry except this one where you do and then you get taught. You do and then you're allowed to do. I think that we as an industry, or as a set of industry concerned persons, need to answer the question of, how do I take a non-competent person and make them competent? What does that look like?
Mhm.
Right. And then how do I check them off? Like, I don't think it's rocket science. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I think we just need to sit down and build a rubric. And I
Mhm.
don't feel like we did that. So I feel like that's my 2 cents, is like, I'm ready to be like action oriented of like, fine, we need a training. And it doesn't necessarily mean I need to develop the content. I don't think we need to get down that rabbit hole, but we need to tell people a training shall consist of a curricula, shall be focused on the concepts of training, right? Like, I feel like you said, we're at a tipping point, but like developing a training for a trainer isn't really different than developing a trainer for a practitioner. It's just different content. So we have all of this stuff. I don't think the industry is being held accountable to its own definition of a qualified person. And I don't think the industry is being held accountable to doing the thing, right? Like, do the thing. Like, there are a lot of people who say that they're a trainer and they're like, and I'm like, show me your resume. Like, I've been training for 3 years. That makes me a trainer. I said, but what made you a trainer in year one? Like, anyways, thanks for listening to my rant. I definitely agree. I feel like I'm just at this like emotional, like tipping point of like, this is ridiculous. It's not that hard. Other industries do this.
Yeah. Thanks. That your comments are recorded. It might even be fun to ask each person that was interested to kind of write out their position, a position statement, and just say, what do you think, and kind of write out so people can read it. But the dialogues
I'll
will,
listen back and reread it later. I'll rewrite it later.
yeah. Alex, you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to go off of what Leslie's saying, I think where it takes my brain is it would be great perhaps if in an ACCT world we could create what we've done for ICE a bit and to grow it and build it and have it be bigger than ICE. Makes sense, more in depth. Perhaps. I think that ICE could be more in depth. I think that the ICE prep and whatnot, like, we could grow it, we could improve it. But I think that for trainers, doing the same kind of a thing, I think that, to your point, Leslie, like, we're never going to say to people, hey, go out and facilitate. And then once you've facilitated, we're going to teach you how to facilitate. Take them through that level 1 training first, and then they're going to go and, get that experience until they can do, level 2. And I think that for trainers, there should be some kind of a training that people receive and to become a trainer. I think that the tricky thing is defining what that would look like. And it feels like there are lots of different models out there in the world of how people do this, from your much disliked kind of shadowing model and mentoring model to folks who go through a robust, like, planned out training type of a thing. I think in terms of adding credibility to people who train, getting them to go through some kind of a legitimate, real trainers training curriculum and receive training to be a trainer is probably a good way to go. I was thinking the other day about does that need to be certification or not? Should that be certification? And I think what I came to is it depends on what we're certifying exactly. And I think that what's tricky there is I guess when I think about facilitators and what facilitation is to me, I think that just because somebody has gone through a level 1 training doesn't make them an excellent facilitator, doesn't make them a master facilitator. It doesn't mean that they have skills with group dynamics and all of those types of things. In some ways, they about have enough information to be dangerous. So they still need oversight from somebody. And so, in whatever we build in the trainer world, it should be the same thing. I think that there are ways that we can have different levels where there are folks who have base knowledge and are kind of building that understanding and building that skill. We've talked about this many times. There are tasks that we would have a brand new, or a newer trainer do, and there are tasks that we wouldn't have them do. So also kind of thinking about those and how we kind of line all of that out feels like it would be important as well. So I don't know. I feel like I've just got ramblings and musings at the moment on it, but those are some thoughts.
Well, no, I mean, that's really helpful. And, one of the things that with this dialogue is just, if we can put stuff on this mural as we kind of think about it, and possibly you can help me kind of build out the mural. Like I have, here's the contributors, here is, if we were to consider the questions, the answer, they would be here. Shall there be is there a uniform curriculum from everybody? Is there a test that people take? And these are all kind of the questions. But then there's another piece that's kind of like, considerations. Another area might even be, our brainstorms, what are potential models look like? So the questions, it's like, should there be a book of trainers? Should there be a universal curriculum? Should there be um, um, levels to the training? Should there be some kind of review, testing procedure? Should there be, those are a lot of the questions that need to get answered at some point. Um, what are all the factors in the system that we need to consider? How can credential differentiate attributes and mastery as a trainer? Should there be different levels of trainers that show, here you're getting the apprentice trainer, and you should know that, or you're getting a master with, if we think of operational, this person has 10,000 hours of training documented under their belt. You should be able to know the level that your trainer's at, and then be able to look at that and say, well, yeah, this one's really worth it because they're this, or no, we don't need that. We just need this, and we're willing to pay this lower price point. So, I mean, it comes a marketing thing. The stakeholders, what are the needs of the vendors? What do they need? What do trainees need? What do trainers need? What do the clients need? So these are all some of the questions that I've kind of chewed on a little bit that would inform what actually gets created. So it's kind of, thought there. Brian, do you have a thought on this, or are you just an auditory voyeur? Unmute.
There we go.
There you go.
I come at this with a certain amount of skepticism.
Good.
In that generally in professions, certification is quite often not about competence. It's about who gets paid to do the work. You get more money if you're a certified plumber or a certified teacher or whatever.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily guarantee competence or whatever at it. It's I think, for example, the certification of instructors, of facilitators, although again, there's a lot of it that I don't like. Some of the byproducts of that has been forcing people to get more training, which is good. For me, there are some unintended or whatever consequences of it. And who's certified, there's a question of who's certifying things. And obviously I'm a person who has been the idea that in the ACT realm, it's the vendors who get to certify people has been there's been a monopoly thing there that I've not really appreciated. And I can remember Carl Ronke speaking the same thing that I am now, which is that Carl was never certified to do anything. I think our field is there's an interesting sort of philosophical question here, because we are experiential. We're in the experiential education realm. And so we actually believe that you can't really understand something until you do it. So there's a certain I think there's a certain amount of value or question about if we believe in experiential education, do we believe, in fact, that you're going to learn it by doing it? Which is putting, for some people, it's putting the cart in front of the horse. And I wonder, if you're a trainee, if you follow my thing, would we be including in a curriculum that you have to train something that isn't challenge course? Just as an arbitrary exercise, as I thought about this, I was like, okay, so I'm going to pick something. I'm going to pick an arbitrary subject and discover, okay, so how, as a trainer, would I teach this thing that really is not, that's not the usual, okay, I'm going to teach this person knots. So, and for me, I picked counting. Like, how would I teach people how to count? That made me have to learn about counting. And why do we count in 10? Why do we count in 12? And then try and teach people from that how to count, and then look at the process of how did I teach people how to count, and can I transfer that as a skill to how do I train people how to facilitate or tie knots or do whatever. Is this making any sense to you, to people? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So, that makes me think of, like, included in the curriculum would be stuff like participant-centered learning. How do people learn? How do their brains work? How do you adapt the way their brains work to how you're teaching? For example, if you're trying to get people to problem solve or memorize stuff, then their brains have to have glucose in them, because otherwise the cerebral cortex doesn't work. So how do you make sure that that trainer keeps that in mind as they're trying to teach people that? Because otherwise they can't learn it. They can't memorize it. Another example would be, okay, so looking at auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learning. How do you make sure that you're teaching people, you're training people with who are visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners? And maybe arbitrarily you teach them, again, how do you make a person learn about counting visually, auditorially, and kinesthetically as an arbitrary exercise, to then go, all right, so now how do I teach knot tying or facilitating with visual, auditory, and kinesthetic stuff in mind? So I think, and I, to shift gears a little bit as well, when you look at a lot of the professions that we have, you ask doctors, when did you really learn how to be a doctor? Was it in medical school? And they go, no, it was when I was an intern. And they made me do a lot of shit, and most of it I didn't know how to do, right? And when did you learn how to be a lawyer? Oh, was it in law school? No. When I clerked, and when I had, so I really think that um, just like for a facilitator to teach a facilitator how to facilitate a ropes course, we have a lot of doing with mentoring happening with them as they're doing it. Try this out, lead this activity, and now we're going to give you feedback about how you led the activity. Now tie this knot, and we're going to watch you. And, just as that, how do we then, it's sort of a meta question of how do we include in the curriculum that a person is training challenge course facilitators, and how do we give them the opportunity to do that with enough mentoring and supervision that they're not making real mistakes. Like, how do I ensure that when Alex is teaching facilitators how to tie knots, that he's actually doing it right, so that they get it correct, so that down the end of the line, the knots are really well tied and all that kind of stuff. I did a workshop at Breckenridge a couple of years ago, and they asked me to do my knot progression, and some of the people were like, wow, that's a whole different way of doing it, and it really worked. And so how do we develop those different ways of teaching knots, so that different people who learn it differently can get it, so that if my one way of teaching knots doesn't work for this person, can I adapt? Because the object of the trainer is to make sure that the person that they're training is effective at what they do, not just that they learn my method. So I guess I've probably rambled a lot.
I got a few notes out of that. And one thing, if we could, in this process of when you have thoughts and stuff, could you, make a tag and stick it on the board? If we could each report on what we come up with, if possible. But, Brian, like from yours, I heard, about the curriculum. It needs to consider the trainer needs to consider learning style, learning theory, the learning environment, how to teach, how do we include, I couldn't finish that thought. And then something about competence. A trainer needs to be competent in the skills. So those are components that I pulled out of yours that are those. So again, it's there, we can make them statements or we can make them questions, but there are things that need to be answered. So Leslie, let's jump over to you. Got your hand raised up there.
I think that a lot of what you're talking about, Waldo and Tom, are related to ongoing education and mastery. And I think what has hurt our industry is no one's willing to put a stake in the sand for this is how we start, right? And so what I mean by that is yeah, I agree that people who are ICE certified, that's not the correct acronym for that, but people who have gone through the inspector credentialing process with ACCT may or may not be the best inspector and may or may not be the inspector you want. The reality is that we needed a baseline to say these people have reached a point, period. Okay. And I think that that's where we're lacking for trainers right now. I agree that the model, the matrix that's set up, should require ongoing education. I agree that the model that we set up should acknowledge years of competency. And that's more of like when you sell yourself, right? So we have inspectors that have like hundreds of clients because they're like, this person has been doing this for 30 years and they're involved in the standard, and that's a marketing pitch, and I'm fine with that, right? I don't think that I'm not in the business of creating a program so people can then sell themselves or oversell their abilities, right? This isn't like, ooh, you have this fancy certification and now you can go run the world. No, I think that there needs to be a process of us saying, you have to have undergone some training and you need some either auditing or supervision or both throughout the process, right? But those are words that don't exist right now for this industry on paper. So it is as simple as putting on paper, as a trainer, you need to be audited at least once every, we're going to put a stake in the sand, every 3 years, right? Where someone comes and observes your training, right? Which they kind of do for the peer review process, but not really. They're really reviewing the training, not the trainer. That's a sidebar, right? That is what I think where we need to be. And then, yeah, like when you reach that target of, let's say, becoming a trainer for level ones, right? It could also be that it's product specific. I intentionally do not say site specific because we're trying to change our language, right? It's operating system specific, right? You're not going to have everything at once, right? Maybe you will. Maybe by the time you get there, maybe you came in with a PhD in education and you're like a ropes course, like super snazzy person, right? So therefore you put the two together and you can test out. But when I look at it, I don't think there's one formula, because I agree with you, Waldo. Like, people have different learning styles and they're also going to approach their careers differently. Some people are going to work their way up and work under mentorship models and all these things, right? And other people are going to take the class and gain the skill, right? So there are people in the medical profession who learned by getting, they just worked for a doctor, right? Especially in countries that don't have the capacity to have a school yet. And then there are others, but we also don't let people just into hospitals and say, here, come watch another doctor for 10 years and then you can do surgery. We do require they have this baseline training, whether it's everything that they'll need is not the point, and then they can go in the field and do something. So I think it's like all of the things, but it needs to be put on paper, right? So requiring that the standards say like trainers have to be audited or whatever. So I don't want to repeat myself. Alex, go.
I didn't raise my hand. I didn't raise my hand so you would stop talking. I guess some thoughts that are popping into my mind that I have written down and I'm kind of thinking about, which is tough with all of this, is how do we do this in a way where it doesn't cost a fortune? And like, that's the other kind of tricky thing in my brain is I'm thinking about like the amount of time that I spend to develop Synago trainers is extensive. And it's expensive. And so I'm just like, how, you know, as much as I would believe that all of you all are great trainers, and I hope that you would think the same of me, I've never seen any of your trainings. You've never seen any of my trainings. How do we know, right? Unless you've had somebody look over your shoulder, like you were saying, Tom, like it's difficult to say like, oh yeah, this person's definitely got it or not got it. And so, you know, that's kind of where we go with a lot of the ways that we're developing the trainers that we have is that shadowing, reverse shadowing model, some of the stuff that Brian was talking about. The other thought that popped into my mind was comparing it to the law school thing or the doctor thing, I think is good. The other thought is driving lessons. And with driving lessons, I mean, I remember just like being very quickly put behind the wheel of a car. And somebody was there, and in the UK, when I did my driving lessons, they had a modified car and they had pedals on both sides of the car. And so if I was going to do something where I was going to screw something up, there was somebody who was there who was actively going to stop me from doing that. And I think that when it comes to training, that's really a pretty important thing that we should have in place. So I think it's both. I think that people need to be trained properly, but I also think that people need to have close supervision, you know, in maybe the same way that we, in the current version of the standards, we have the thing when people are moving through an aerial adventure park, right? Depending on how old they are and the type of system they're using, they might have to have somebody who's right there with them, who's able to stop them from double unclipping. Right? Or if they're older and they're using a different system, maybe they can, you know, they can get away with more. And I think in the same way for, Leslie put a great thing on the screen yesterday where she was talking about, you know, the importance of thinking about the level of responsibility that a trainer has diminishing over time and the level of responsibility that the trainee has over time, like increasing kind of a thing. And so that makes me think about like at the end of a training, I want to be able to walk away feeling like I'm kind of stepping back, like over time, stepping back and leaving them to do their thing. And we need to do the same thing with trainers, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. There are some thoughts. How do we get people to get behind the wheel and get that practical learning that they need, but also get the additional skills? Yeah, to go back to the first point, like how do we do it without it, without it costing a fortune? I don't know.
Yeah, and then there's the, who would, if you put yourself in that place of going like, yeah, nobody's ever seen me train, somebody else should, like, who would that be? Like, who would you, Alex, go like, yeah, if Waldo watched me, I'd go like, nah, that ain't worth anything. If Tom watched me, yeah, that would mean something. And if Leslie regulated it, then, we all be good. And so, so who is it that is watching us? And for me, I worked in quality assurance in healthcare, and the thing that over and over doctors believe helps improve the quality of care is peer review, is having other people who you think you believe, have the experience and the knowledge and the capacity watching you and making you and going like, yeah, that would be great, except, you don't have to do the full incision now. You can do it this laparoscopically. And that's the thing that produces the most learning, the most respected learning from people instead of some hierarchical or whatever. And obviously that's really expensive because it's somebody else's time. I also want to, in the realm of inclusion, exclusion, I think we can have a certain, just like facilitators, we can have a certain understanding of this is what if I'm a certified trainer, I'm training about this material, but that there are other people who might not be a certified trainer who have very valuable education that could come in, So for example, at UCLA, not only did we do regular training, there were some times when we had like counseling people who knew shit about challenge courses and ropes and any of that kind of stuff, who would come in and talk to us about how do you work with a group? How do you do that soft side? And so I think we have to value that and value that as a part of what people might be exposed to, without having to say, oh no, the only person who can work with these facilitators is somebody who's a certified trainer in this, if you're following me.
I guess I think also about, though, like, we obviously got there, right? We let people operate these courses, right? I mean, we agree that they are competent enough, right? We've checked the box enough that we let paying customers or school groups or whatever you want to call them come play with us, right? They're going to come do a task with us, and we're going to do the task with them. And I think we can all agree there are better and worse facilitators. But at some point we release the humans to do the things, and it's going to happen. And the other thing that's happening is that someone's teaching those people. So I think the thing that's not even established as a minimum baseline that we're all doing, but we did do for practitioners, is we agreed we had to get consistent in our own business, right? So if you are a vended service within ACCT and you want to be a professionally vended service within ACCT, because there are people who are offering services that are not professional, and that's fine, but they have put it in writing and they have a curricula, right? So like, this is how we're going to train practitioners for this type of product. This is how we're going to train practitioners for this type of product, right? That doesn't mean that they have everything they could ever use. That doesn't mean they know all the people skills they need, but we've decided that they'll do this, and then and then as long as they check the box of competency or qualification, whatever right? I wonder if that's really the first starting places before the deeper dive of like certification, not certification, peer review, not peer review, is just to say the same standard that we hold ourselves to for practitioner certification, or sorry, practitioner training, we're going to hold ourselves to for trainer training. Like, can we just start there as a group? Could we agree as a group that to provide a training to operators, staff, practitioners, monitors, guides, whatever word you want to use for them, you need a syllabus, you need a curricula, you need to understand normal operating procedures, you need to understand atypical operating procedures, if there exists emergency operating procedures, those things. And because we're extraordinary, we're going to do better this next time, you need to understand the inherent risks associated with those things and how to mitigate the risks. So the like, and you have to have a documented plan or something to address the inherent risks. Like, how do you ensure that when non-competent people are becoming competent, that they don't double unclip or drive off the road, for your examples, Alex, right? If we could just get every single service provider to do that, whether they're providing the service internally or to a paying client, would we not raise the bar as an industry? Would trainings not be better? Right. And I get that I focus a lot on documentation because I say if you haven't written it down, it doesn't happen, but I need to get consistent, right? Like, that's what I'm saying is that, like, it's not that I think I'm good, it's that I've put it down. And then at minimum, that could be the minimum. And then hopefully we could say, and then if we could all agree to that, the next step could be we could agree to some sort of audit process potentially, or peer review process. Right. And you get to choose who your peer review is, right? Like, you get to choose who your peer review is. You get to choose who you pay to audit you. So yeah, you might pick somebody that you feel like is going to give you a pat on the back, but that's still better than nothing. Right. If we could get all of that done, then maybe in the future we could also have credentialing. But like right now, we don't even hold ourselves to the same requirements for trainers that we do for practitioners. And that just like blows my mind. Or I don't feel like we hold people. I mean, I do. Like, I was like, I'm not training trainers without all the same things I would train a practitioner for, but like, I don't think I'm in the majority on that. So I don't know. I mean, that's sort of where I'm like, let's just start with what we already have and do it, because they're already doing it. Right. And I don't think we should separate between like outside sourcing or internal sourcing, because to Waldo's point much earlier, right? Like, people are going to come at it from different ways. So we should have the same outline, the same like can use for any, it doesn't matter what your business model is. Internal, external, sometimes internal, sometimes external, whatever. And then there should be something in there that says, you know, there should be a test or there should be a checklist. We recommend you have this, you know, it's a recommendation or something. Just, I don't know. It just seems to me like a good starting place, right? Like, do the same thing we're already doing.
And so,
Yeah.
and so, you know, when so I look at, okay, so how is it working now? And what would the change be if we did something like this? So for example, you know, I went to an ACCT conference and did a workshop on the 4 attitudes and behaviors that help people survive in dire consequences. And because of that, a person from the Breckenridge Outdoor Education Center said, we want you to come to Breckenridge for a week and do both hard skill training and soft skills, and also explore with the staff why do we do this stuff? Like, why would we, why do we want to get relatively low wages to take people who are disabled, who are not going to be very good at it, on adventures? Like, why are we doing that? So, and so I was doing a training, right? And they had, from just doing that workshop, and I don't know, maybe they, behind my back, they talked to Tom Leahy or somebody who they said, oh, you know this guy? And and is he any good? So I think about and maybe this is because I'm old, because I'm chronologically gifted. When I go, okay, so what would I in this process, what would I have to go through so that, because under this process, I would think to a certain extent, people would say, no, you can't do that anymore. Because you're not certified, or, you haven't. So I wonder, what would change in this, and what would I have to do that would be different. There's as people are now starting to get together, I'm getting, and I'm not retired from UCLA, I'm getting requests from challenge course groups in the area to help them with training, because they've lost a lot of staff, or they want to be renewed, or they need to get more people. And other than word of mouth, and maybe they talk to the wrong people, other than word of mouth, they're calling me and saying, would you help us with this? And on some levels, like UC Irvine called me the other day, and other than reputation, how the hell do they know that I know what I'm talking about? When I first worked for Adrian Kistler, his certification process was to make me do a body belay. And he asked me, who do I know that he knows that would recommend me? And I was lucky enough that I could say Carl Ronke. And
Yeah.
that had credibility with Adrian Kistler. He goes like, oh, okay. So if Carl would say you're okay, then you're okay. And in that, looking over your shoulder thing, I certainly think that has value, and credibility. That I can say, if somebody says, oh, so who have you worked for? Turn your head, Tom. I can say Tom Leahy, and there are some people who then will go like, well, then you're not working for me, or yes, you are working for me. So.
Well, I just want to say that I've seen all three of you train, typically in workshops and stuff. And I find you all incredibly competent and practiced and organized. Leslie and Alex train more in the, train the trainer in the, adventure park, zip line, in that area. And Brian, you're more, you and I overlap in that we train in the cognitive and spiritual realm too. We train in, some different areas and stuff. And then Brian, you train, I've watched you train people, to belay and climb and do all that stuff. So it's I think there's the peer review process is certainly part of this, or maybe getting letters from people who have witnessed your training. I would love to shadow all of you doing a training. And part of my idea around this, 15 years ago was that, we would each have to go, somebody would come and shadow our workshop as part of our review process. And then they could log that as training received. And then I get to log it as training delivered. And so you get a workshop, you get 40 hours of training received by shadowing me, and then you report on me about what you experience of my training style and stuff. So there's ways to do it. One thing, jumping back, Brian, it's like, I got to correct something, because I wrote the practitioner certification, and what it said, and I don't know if it's in there anymore. I think Scott Andrews might have pulled it out, is that certification is granted by a certifying body. And we wrote it that way because we got shit thrown at us and said, gosh darn it, I'm a university. Why can't I train? Is this just for the ACT vendors? And so we changed the language to say certification is delivered by a certifying body. And we left it right there. We just stepped away. And then it's up for people to determine whether or not they are a certifying body. So we left that one there. I didn't see it in the standards. Now I'm not
It
sure
is-
which said I'd have to go back and find that language anymore.
You can,
And-
yeah, anyone can be a certifying agency. I tell that to people all the time. You can write
Yeah.
a certificate. The question is how much validity does it have?
Right.
I have to say that while I understand the human part of like reference checks and resumes and who knows who, I do not believe that that's healthy for the industry long-term for several reasons, because it is exclusionary and because it is subjective, not objective. And that is a problem the ICE program had and is trying to work through, which is, I don't want to have to decide if what you've received is adequate because I know somebody who knows somebody. And so the reason that I was saying to start at the minimum is, do you even have these things, right? So so pause there. And then like going back to what you said, Brian, like anybody can hire you. You do whatever you want, right? That's their choice, right?
Yeah.
Are you qualified? Doesn't matter in that context unless there's a need for it to be qualified, right? So from a baseline level, this is why, like, I've always been passionate. Those who've known me in the industry long enough know that training trainers is my like pride and joy moment in my life.
Me too.
We had a death in Colorado that was a 6-year-old girl because the operator did not understand the system they were using, even on a basic level. They had been taught inadequately. This isn't advanced. Like, they just didn't see that the seatbelt wasn't clipped. How do you miss that? Because they were not taught to operate the system. They were taught to go through some motions, and they did not have an understanding of the system or their responsibilities, right? That is a huge problem. And that is because there is no standard for that, right? Like we don't hold people to it. There's nothing that says this is what you need to train people to do. Like, we don't even have that minimum agreement, but we do have that agreement, right? I don't think there's anybody who says you shouldn't know how your system operates that you're about to use. No, you should know how your system operates and what your responsibilities are in that system, right? And then just to bump it up one notch, trainers need to understand that system. They need to understand the responsibilities. They need to be able to monitor people who are learning that information, and they need to be able to check a box that somebody demonstrated under supervision and then without any prompts. Like we all know how to check somebody off on belay, right? The way you check somebody off on belay ultimately is you say, great, here are the pieces, put it together, do the thing correctly, right? That's it. That's a check off, right? We all do it at climbing gyms all the time, right? They don't know me. I could walk into the climbing gym and be like, well, my resume is that, like, blah, blah, blah. They don't care. They don't care what my resume is. I walk in, this is the expectation. Everybody does the same thing. You show me, and you can show me P-bus, you can show me slip, slide, slide, you could show me waterfall, you can show me Australian belay. Some gyms say like, we don't allow that, and that's fine, right? They hold me to it, but like in general, you do the things, right? If they have to correct you, prompt you, or tell you why it's wrong, you've not passed. It's that simple. And I think that we get mired in like all the ways it could be better. And I'm like, please, can we just stop getting mired in that? Can we just raise the bar enough that we have something more than passing the buck and saying they have to be qualified?
Hey, Leslie, I want to say something about
Yeah.
the 6-year-old, and I welcome you to respond 0, because I'm going to call a question. And my question is in that case, the operator at Glenwood is a Colorado inspector. And I don't know if she's the one who did the training or not, but I'm like, okay, you're training your own people, but then you're going out and you're doing Colorado inspections. So I don't expect you to answer. You are a representative of the state, and you have confidentiality.
No,
Yeah.
I don't have confidentiality there.
Okay.
She did not train those operators. Another employee did. And although she had been a trainer in the past, and she does not inspect her own things, she only inspects the other things, and she's doing structural inspections.
Yeah.
We in Colorado don't mandate an operational inspection.
Yeah.
However, you have to see one ride cycle, which is the fun way of saying you have to see the thing and do the things it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So yes. So it is different. But the person who trained them, no, the signature is not them.
Well, and my front load was, I didn't want to bait you because I'm very respectful of your position, and I don't ever want to ask you something
No,
that's,
you're fine.
and you'll tell me if
It's public record. It's public record. So I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have that same thing.
So, but it's just, yeah. So I mean, it's still, yeah. Well, we probably should, and I'm about to write a letter to the state and just simply say that I think that commercial gyms working with minors in rock climbing programs should be under the state amusement device law.
That's fine. We're talking, just, I mean, yeah, like, I mean, this is not like, I mean, you can quote me on it, but it was like, we're not making progress, but we are looking at how is an auto belay device used in a gym different than on a challenge course,
Yeah.
right? Like an auto belay device specifically, not a facilitated climbing wall where there's learning happening.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I just, I walked in 3 weeks in a row to where my son goes to his climbing class, and I found the same the same rapid link, only partially threaded. Pointed out to 5 different people, and the last time I about lost it. I had to leave. I was so angry. And they, well, we check everything, and I'm like, obviously not. So anyhow, I that's just me getting triggered about the safety of my son. So,
Alex,
well,
you got your hand up, and then I had a couple
yeah.
things I wanted to put in too, but
I guess I just had a quick question. I don't know what the answer is here. I'm not really necessarily trying to lead anywhere with it. But Leslie, you were talking about with the practitioner, if, the way that we would check whether they belay or know how to belay is we would say, hey, can you do these skills? And then they show the skills, and then we all say, you've got it, right? So if that's the case, the question that came into my mind is, so therefore, can a trainer present a trainee? And if that trainee can go through those skills, does that tell you that the trainer knows what they're doing and is a qualified, competent trainer?
right. That was one of my 2 points, was to say, if you want to judge my competence as a trainer, you should go look at all those UCLA students that I trained and go like, are these guys competent or not? Right? Because that's the work. Is that successful? Like me, it's just like you can watch the excuse me. You can watch the doctor, or you can look at the patient, go like, oh, patient's still alive. You can watch the guy teaching you how to drive, or we can say like, okay, Alex, you've been driving now for 3 years. How many accidents have you had? And judge your trainer some by that. And obviously that gets into the thorny questions of whose responsibility is it, the learning person or the training person for the end product.
I think it's both.
And it is both. I agree.
Because yes, but I wouldn't say like I can judge them 3 months later, right? So like Alex trains Leslie, and 3 months later I check on Leslie. That to me does not show if you had an adequate training, right? That shows my ability to like maintain skills. That's about me, right? But if I come to the training to audit you, right, I'm checking off your trainer skills.
Right.
If by the end of the lesson, persons can do it, yes. Also, though, if there's a box that you have to, or if there's a list of things that you have to cover, right? What is the system? How do you inspect the system? What are the inherent risks of the system? What are the responsibilities of this system, right? Like, let's say like those are the minimums, right? That we all agree on, and you cover those. Yeah, it's a checkbox, and like, yes, as a regulator, I definitely like a checklist more than others, but like, at least I can say you did that, right? Because one of the things that is or isn't happening is you might teach someone super well how to tie the figure 8 and how to belay, but what you don't cover at all is what happens if my climber gets hurt at the top and then like, can't hold their body in that perfect L position, right? Now, I'm not saying that person belaying has to know how to self-belay, escape, and self-rescue, right? But they don't even know that that's part of the thing that they're involved in, and they should know that, right? So I feel like we need to be able to say your training has that, right? Like, and it could be an affirmative, right? Like where you're self-evaluating. Again, this is a new thing. So maybe we start with an affirmation, right? I affirm that my training has these components. Just hold you accountable to yourself, because right now I feel like people can't even check that list. Maybe in the future we hold them accountable, but like, does your training cover all the things that you say you're going to train somebody to do, right? And as a trainer's trainer, did you I feel like we can't even, I feel like that to me is like the start is like, yeah, how well does your trainee do? But even more basically, like, can you even affirm that you have a program to train trainers? That could be like the first box. Do you even have a program to train your trainers versus you just kind of like wing it? Each person gets their own experience. Like that's the danger. That's the game of telephone I don't like, right?
And some of the models that we know actually fail, and we still do them. Like for for CPR and first aid, when they pass the paper test, 90 days later, the people who passed that test, 40% of them can't pass the test. So it's like, and they're certified for 3 years or 2 years or however long. And it's like, no, actually. And it is, it's true in terms of anybody can certify anybody. The state of California said that I could run a ropes course. They had no frickin' idea, right? Absolutely no frickin' idea whether I could or not. But they hired me, and so I was certified. And so yeah, it's
Well, we certify, yeah. So we certify in the state of Colorado inspectors, right? Structural inspectors. And we base it off of either a certification they've received from a reputable, well, not reputable, from a well-known industry thing that the stakeholders have all agreed, we think this is what you hold us accountable to, or their experience, which we then base off of the minimum requirements for the certifying bodies. That's just basically how we do it. So not every certification, to your point, is because I think you're good at this, but it's because you've met the minimum requirements, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And doesn't necessarily get people more clients in the state of Colorado, right? I don't know, Tom, you'll have to tell me, did you get more clients in the state of Colorado once we certified you to inspect in Colorado, or is it basically the same clients? It's just the process requires you to have paperwork.
I do get some calls, but they're typically, bungee jumping or not bungee jumping, trampoline and some of this other stuff. I turn them all down. I quite frankly have shrunk my commercial list because they scare me. Lawson Adventure Park terrifies me, and I help them and I regret it. But I know that ice certificate last spring. Alex won the Air National Guard. They made it. They wouldn't even call me. They looked at the inspector list, and I had blown off that. It's my own responsibility. I blew off. I did the first ice certification when it came out, and I just said I don't really need this, so I didn't. And then the Guard decided that they needed a level 2 inspector, and so Elijah couldn't even call me. And it's like, fine, that's what they wanted and stuff. So I ran back out and got my, I just got my thing and everything. Now Alex, I got to tell you, the good side of this is that everybody up there really liked you. They told me you are a wonderful, competent trainer. So I have another perspective on you. And I am, and Alex, you're a threat to my business, but now I'm realizing that you are a boon for my business, because now I don't build or repair anymore, and I'm going to start turning down inspections. So all of a sudden now I know somebody that my clients like, and I know that I can recommend Alex wholeheartedly, because my clients have already told me, I've seen you train, they've seen you train, there's credibility there. And so I called Alex's boss and I said, can we work together? I'm transitioning. Let's work together. So it's, it worked. I don't know why I went off in this direction and stuff, but there's, there are different ways of telling, somebody's competence and stuff like that too. So I don't know if you guys can see, I've been trying to make little yellow note cards in the open space on the mural. Brian, did you see the mural?
No.
I was in the wrong space. Wow, there's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, let's see if I can copy. I'm going to put it back in the chat again for you guys to see.
I think the other thing for me that I'm thinking about as well is the difference between to kind of go back to maybe a point that I was talking about earlier on, and Leslie was talking about, it's almost the like evaluating the product or the result of the training. So does the person know the thing that they need to know, and can they do it, as one thing? And that in some ways, the question is there value in watching the actual training, or just the result, just the product that comes out? And my question then is, though, observation and feedback of that training, what I've written down, observation of, and feedback of the training is a service to develop trainers and to help them improve. Because in some ways, if you only watch the product, sure, you can give them the stamp and you can say, yep, you taught that person how to belay. I can see that they can belay now. They didn't before. You've clearly done it right. But there isn't any extra added value there. And I think that what I'm interested in, and what we have done with some of our clients, is, you know, approach folks who do their own training, who want further like growth and development, and who are looking for somebody to say, hey, you know what you're doing, and here are some ways that you can improve, and all of those kinds of things. And then it just comes back to, you know, your point of who checks the checker, right? Like how do you get this chicken and egg situation? Which one comes first? Like, how do you figure it out? Like who gets to give the stamp? And another thing that I wrote down earlier on was thinking about, you know, perhaps the PVM review style type of a thing. Like, is there a way where there could be, you know, some group of people who do, for whatever reason, have that stamp and have the ability to go around and check some of that stuff? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. The part of me that, like Leslie, I love training trainers. And, you know, that for me, that would be like a dream job, would be to go around to trainings of organizations and give them feedback and information and stuff like that. Because all of that, for me, it's all about the learning and that process. And I think that the more we're watching each other in a peer sense, the more the person who's checking is going to learn as well, by going like, wow, I've never seen anybody do that before, but that's really good. And I think, you know, I just watched Alex do that. Next week, when I go see Leslie, I'm going to go tell her about that. I do think, you know, when I was in legal services and stuff, we looked both at the product and the process. So, you know, whether it's looking at the trained facilitator and going like, yeah, you can do your job, and looking at the training, we did a combination of the both. One was for us, one of them was a little cheaper, in that we were doing a record review and taking a case and going like, did this client get what they wanted? And is the stuff in this record supporting that they should have asked? You know, they did ask the question about Medicare, but they didn't ask the question about food stamps. And so, you know, we can tell from the record, from the product, from that product, we get some measure of what the quality of service was. But then we also had a peer review thing to watch the process as well. So I agree with you, Alex, that I think in the best of all worlds, if we're willing to put our money where our mouth is and make the commitment, both looking at the product, the time it takes to look at the product, and also look at the process, is going to improve the quality of what we do. And the question is, are we willing to invest in it?
Totally. I was just going to say the same thing. I mean, you know, quality is expensive.
Yeah.
So if that's what we want to be quality. We want to have a quality process and a quality product. We're going to have to invest into that.
Yeah.
That's the only way to get there.
Well, maybe this, I might jump in here. Brian, I'm sorry to miss what you said, but I've been staying well hydrated. So, you know, I kind of, this is a cool conversation. And wonder, we don't, what time do we start? 11:30? So we have about 20 minutes left. And I wonder if we want to take a few minutes to kind of write some stuff down and leave our mark. And possibly even, put your initials on, or not on tags that you do. But the process thing, the cost thing, if we look at it from vendors need to be able to train a bunch of people and get their asses out in the field in a short period of time. And then it's, and I'm like, well, it'd be nice to know what the competence, the experience, the realm, the breadth of the trainer is. It would be nice to kind of have something bigger, but we don't need that at the first level. So kind of if we go back to practitioner certification, I initially wanted there to be like 4 levels. And we ended up with 2 plus CCM, and CCM wasn't proposed. It was level 1, level 2, and then CCM is over here. It's
Yep.
like a different, it's section section A, and the level 1, level 2 or section B and C and D or something like that. So it was a different thing. But the problem I had with it was that the requirements went from 1,200 hours for level 2, it went down to 200 hours for level 2. And that was based on, Micah came into our committee and she said, we need to get these people out, and we can't wait for them to have 1,200 hours of experience before we get them on a course. So we brought it down to 200, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, there's nothing aspirational about the system. And so where I am now with trainer credentialing is it needs to be aspirational. It has to point people off way into the distance of a goal they could achieve. And you might say like PhD. You could have an associate's degree, that's fine. That's what you need. But at some point in the future, you could actually have a PhD, and that's aspirational. And so the problem, and when in scuba diving, there's the basic, open water scuba diving and stuff like that. But then you can work your way up. Then there's all these specialties, and then there's something called dive master. And dive master is the highest non-professional level in scuba diving. And then past dive master, then there's instructor, and then you move into the professional realm. So for me, that's always seemed like kind of an interesting model. And it is aspirational, because by the time you get to dive master, you're looking at that instructor. And dive master is where I got the bends twice, and I knew I'd washed out and I was never going to be an instructor. So I had all my hours for instructor. I was ready to test for dive master. And then I'm like, shit, there goes that. I was going to go on tours every year for free and be a dive master, an instructor. So kind of where kind of what I'm looking at here, and Leslie, I heard some of your stuff, is if we have an aspirational system, it would start with practitioner certification. There's level 1. And Alex, your point, level 1 people have no experience at all. And what we called it at that point was level 1 was a license to learn. It's like you take the workshop, take the test, boom, you're level 1. Nobody's seen you do squat. And then level 2, you need 200 hours plus more training received, another test, and then all of a sudden you're level 2. And then that's it. There's nothing to aspire to, except 3 years from now, I just need to recertify for 3 years, and all I need is X number of hours and another test, and I'm done. I don't even have to take the class again. So there's a big weakness with the system. So kind of where I ended up with is level 1, level 2, and then something called the trainer applicant or trainer trainee or apprentice trainer, something in which a person would need to take workshops on delivering training and take workshops on delivering content. And then a certain amount of shadow time, which they would do with the vendor. The workshops is shadowing time, and then they would take a test somehow at that point, and then they would become a trainer 1. And a trainer 1 has all the prerequisites. They've done a lot of they've done some shadowing and stuff, and then they can deliver content as soon as they certify at trainer 1, because, and it's probably with a vendor that they've done it, the vendor invests in their own people. And then, but then I'm kind of beyond this, is that trainer 2 would then have to, I don't know if they would take another test, but they would show that they delivered X 100 hours of training. and done something else to kind of prove their confidence in continuing stuff. But then, wait for it, then we aspirational, then there's trainer 3, and trainer 3 has something like 3,000 hours of training delivered. So this is something, it would take people a while to get there, but at this point, this person's got some serious experience. And then this person might need to demonstrate by providing, here are my training outlines, and this is how I match the syllabus and the curriculum. And these are my training records and documentation that I've developed for, somebody to look at. And then trainer 4 matches the operational reviewer with 10,000 hours of documented training delivered and 5 potential documents that this person has created subject for review: their training manual, the workbooks that they do, the curriculum they've developed, the syllabus they've written, the tests that they've created. So this system is basically saying it's going to take a long time to get there, but at some point in the future, it will keep people in the industry. It keeps them growing their field. It keeps them working on their portfolio. It keeps them taking more workshops. It gets them writing materials and stuff like that. So it's kind of my sales pitch is to create a credentialing system that is aspirational and has components that demonstrate competence throughout the whole thing, that propels them for continuing education. And at the higher levels, trainer 2, applicant trainer 1 and trainer 2 could be, just an ACT process that people do that doesn't really cost much. But trainer 3, then we might need the review of the peers might come in at trainer level 3 and trainer level 4. Where you actually at trainer 4, you might have to I might be sitting right now with the 4 or 5 of you presenting all my stuff, and you guys reviewing it, checking boxes, asking me before I could get my trainer 4. And I want that trainer 4. And then the only other component is just, I think there's a whole nother category of the trainer, the trainer of trainers becomes a whole different thing. So, there's a lot of complexity there, but so I just, I really want to get, some, I want to keep the dialogue going with people. We've got about 10 minutes left in this session. And my intent is for today was to kind of like, what would this look like if I bring people together, and can we record the stuff that we talked about? And can we keep taking this further where we actually develop it? So I think it needs to happen, but it needs to satisfy the needs of vendors. It needs to be a broad document that even universities could use it. ACT can be involved at a certain point. And one of my questions is, shall a proficiency in the ACT operations standards be required to get your trainer level 1? So at the training applicant would take a class on the ACT operational standards, and then take a test proving a knowledge of those standards, and if nothing else, knowing how to find it in the book, which I'm a big believer of. And then ACT can get some money out of this, but then it goes on and on. So I've kind of got this aspirational and maybe a little complex system in mind, but it has to serve a whole scheme of needs for people. And then Leslie, your point about, whether it's an in-house trainer or a professional trainer, this document should probably be able to work for both sides of it. So, and it might be, person may get to level 4 and still just, train their own staff. So that's kind of my distant thoughts.
I like what you're saying. And I think when I was newer in the industry, I would have been like, I'm on board, sign me up. I think that in my place in the industry now, I think that is the thing that hinders people from utilizing the system, because it is so specific and it requires you to have started somewhere in your career at a certain point, right? So like, why is Leslie not an inspector? Leslie not an inspector because she's not a good inspector, right? But at some point I thought maybe I would do inspections, right? And the hoops I had to jump through because there was no alternative process because I needed build hours. It was like, all right, like, why is that? I mean, I get it. I get the thought, but it's like, why is that the only path forward, right? Why is the only way that I can get there this thing, right? Is a hindrance. And I mean, I'm not a good inspector. I miss things. So I shouldn't be one. I should just like you said, like dive master, not for you. Inspector of zip lines structurally, not for me. I think that we are ignoring the reality, which is people are training people all the time. They just are, because we have not told them how to do it effectively. So I wrote up like my little thing. It needs more work, but basically I think trainers should be qualified based on the operating systems. They're saying that there are 6, right? 1 through 6. So the numbers are not levels, the numbers are lateral, right? A, B, C, D, E, F could be used also. So people don't think 6 is higher than 1, right? You could be a trainer for just A, just B, A, C, and F, whatever the operating systems are, and then, and you could be a trainer for all 6. Maybe you're an excellent trainer like Alex, you can do all 6, right? Prerequisites, because I don't believe in age discrimination, you need to be at least 18 years old. I understand that a 25-year-old would be better potentially because they have more experience, but that is not the point. 18 years old is the legal requirement. So they should be 18 with at least 1 year of operational experience on that system, and they have to attend a trainer's training. I don't think that trainer's training is offered by one company. It is something that a company says, this is your trainer's training. That's the minimum. In the future, I'd love to give criteria to that training, but like something that's called a trainer's training. And why did I say a year and not hours? Because at least initially, everyone's system is different. Vail is open for a different amount of time than the Royal Gorges in Colorado because of snowpack. Right? And so hours are different. Are you more qualified at your 205th hour than your 206th hour? I don't know. Are you doing it well or badly? I don't know. Like Kathy Harris says all the time, you can do the same thing for 100 hours badly. Like, right? So but we do understand that over time you gain competence you didn't have your first week of employment, right? So you have to attend a trainer's training. You need to attend at least 16 hours of ongoing training. I just put a pin in it because that's about what we require for other certifications. So 16 hours of ongoing training on being a trainer or on the operating system you're using for each of the operating systems you're qualified for. Trainers require at least 3 years of training on that system for every system you want to be qualified for. And to be qualified, you have to attend a training and then demonstrate a training and be audited at least once every 2 or 3 years. I'm just putting pins in things, right? I think there's more to flush that out, but here's what I know. When my dear friend who runs Jean runs the Forge, right? She had to train 200 staff, right? And next year she's going to have to train about 100, right? How does she get those 100 people trained? It's not the most qualified trainers. It's people who know the operating system and can train it. They have to be trained on something. I also think, and I know I said this in my other thing, but we need to get clear on who develops curricula. I think that is trainers, and I think that is the person who designed the system. One or both of those people. I don't think it's trainers. So earlier, Brian, you made the point of like, if you can teach someone to count, you can teach someone to train. I agree with that in a more global concept, but in these cases, I don't need you to develop training as a trainer. I need you to train this person in the training curricula that I'm gifting you, right? And I think that's a big thing. Like we need to distinguish between curricula development, syllabus development, and just straight up, I'm going to train you right now. Because I know at UCLA, I assume, Brian, you weren't the only trainer. At some point, you passed the torch or shared the torch. So I think we just need to put down what we're actually doing and hold people to at least that minimum, or agree like a Prusik break or clipping into staples. We're not going to do it anymore as an industry. We're just not going to allow that path anymore. So that's sort of where I'm at, is like, how can we write something down? And the ANSI Act standards are supposed to be reopening soon. And so I might start throwing some suggested language at the standards before they open, because I feel like at this point, we're just, everything you said, Tom, I'm like on board for. Whatever the final version is, I'm on board for, but it's just going to take years to get there, right? 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And in the meantime, another 300 courses are going to open and another 10,000 humans are going to get trained. So I just want us to find a happy medium in the meantime. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think we should start doing all the things. I think you should work on the aspirational model. I'm going to work on a more practical, like, how do we get boots on the ground tomorrow? Because I think all of those things need to happen.
Well,
I'm sure.
I think the, you know, the trainee level and, you know, trainer 1 and trainer 2, I think those can really parallel ICE and practitioner, you know, those should be fairly quick to put together. All the background information, and then the aspirational levels will certainly take a bit longer to flush out, but I don't think it's all, I certainly think it's doable. And I think there's a bunch of components to have to do it. And the level system is just one component. The curriculum is another component. The testing procedure, the auditing is another component of this whole thing. Who's the certifying body, credentialing body is another component of this thing. And so there's a bunch of stuff to, you know, that needs to be hammered out. But with certification, I think we met like 3 days in a row, like 4 or 5 times, and they flew 10 of us to meet at places. I mean, meals and lodging, they spent a fortune on practitioner certification, and we got it about half right. So it needed to be done, you know, worked on again right away. But well, we're coming up on the end of this. What next steps? What are you thinking that, I mean, I have my idea of what I think is, you know, the next, you know, it's dialogue, but any thoughts on next steps? What should we do next?
I think we should figure out if I think we should start putting together, like, see if people are ready to start putting on paper, like, what the process is, right? Like, can we put that on process, or do we need more dialogue? I mean, the process is dialogue, but like, do people need to just like spitball their concerns with the current system? Like, what's not there, what is there? I think people should just start putting on paper maybe what they think could happen. And then I think the other next step is like, figuring out, I would love to have a consensus meeting, right? Like similar to standards, whether it ends up in the standards or not, like consensus. Like, do we agree that curricular writing and syllabus writing is not for an entry-level trainer? That like, we all agree that is the obligation of someone else, right? Like, can we come to consensus? Can we come to consensus that to be a trainer for new practitioners doing standard operating and standard emergency procedures, right? Because emergencies are not emergencies, but atypical procedures. This is what we want from them. Like, I would just want to know where we have consensus and don't. I think that's where I'm at. Is like less than like, and how do we build a system? I would love to have like do we have consensus in the industry? Do we have enough consensus? We could start putting something on paper, because I think that will help us decide whether or not there's even support for like a more solidified program, right? Because literally the standard is, you shall conduct a training. It should be by a qualified person. And I'm like, can we get past that? That's where I would love to have that meeting.
With the QCP, we're definitely there. And you know, in the trainer 1, you know, I resonate with the trainer 1 delivers the curriculum that was prescribed by their supervisor. Here's your checklist. Here's the curriculum. Here's the syllabus. Here's the record keeping. You do this and do not wander off. You stay in the lane. You don't have to create anything. You just have to deliver this, and I'll be checking. That's trainer 1. You know, as you get to trainer 3 or 4, that's when people are writing curriculum is much farther up. So
I guess, yeah. So if you, I mean, I know you're going to hold more spaces, but I would love to sit in a breakout room and just talk about consensus on what does it mean to be a trainer, and what is it like, what does that process look like? I would just want to get consensus from the industry.
Well, and I can tell you how fun that is. To a certain degree, I'm kind of past that point, because there just hasn't been for a long time, and I've stopped. I'm not asking anybody's permission. I'm telling ACT what's going to happen next. I'm old enough now that I can do that and have a little bit of leverage with it. But it's like, we're going to do this. Let's dialogue and make it smart, make it aspirational, make it affordable. and allow vendors to get people out in the field quickly and to have something to be able to define, the higher levels of mastery, down the road. So it's, for me, it's not whether or not we're going to do this, is there consensus? It's simply, we're going to do this. Let's have consensus on what it looks like.
And that's what I'm talking about. I mean, I put stakeholders in a room that hate each other, and I'm not afraid of this industry's stakeholders. So I would put everybody in the room. And I do think that even though there has been contention, I do think that people are ready to agree on some minimums.
Yeah.
I do think they are.
Yeah.
Right. And I would just want to know where is that? That's where I would want to,
Yeah.
that's the space I would occupy. Other people can occupy other spaces. That's like, I would support that breakout room.
Yeah.
As an
Well,
step.
the meeting that we did at ACT, pretty much the feel of consensus I got there was, yes, let's do this, but we're all over the place on the questions even, and that's cool. That's where we are. It's just, but so this ongoing dialogue, and it's, the other thing for me is I'm not going to wait for ACT to say, start a committee and huddle in a corner like the curriculum people did. I'm going to have a bunch of dialogues with no ACT structure whatsoever, and then go to, now let's create a committee. We've got a place to kind of start from. So, it's just not worth waiting. But Alex, any final thoughts before we? Thanks for making this time available, brother.
Yeah, no, probably too many. I mean, there's just so much to think through and so much to do, and we've done some really good talking. It'd be good to sit and do some thinking and pondering over kind of what was said, and just, yeah, love to continue to be part of the process and figure it out.
Cool. Brian, closing thoughts? Oh, yeah, unmute.
I'm good. I gotta go.
Okay. Well, listen,
It was a pleasure spending time with you.
keep the link to this mural page. I'm going to add more stuff to it. Nothing is locked down at this point, but I intend to, I'm going to get some help from John, but I'm going to evolve this mural page thing. And then when we meet, the next time I meet with the group, this stuff is going to show up. So if you have the thought, and I know you're all prolific writers, if you have the thought, go ahead and, stick it on this mural page and put your name with it, so that we can, people have questions, and it's always good to know who wrote something, so we can say, oh, hey, Brian, I want to follow up on this, as opposed to, I don't know who wrote this. Sometimes I don't remember what I wrote if I don't put my name on it. But thanks for coming. And Ben, I know you're listening in the background there. So I just want to thank you guys for, listening to my ramblings and my passion, and to the thing I've been bitching about for, 20 years. So I appreciate your support. And I do feel supported by you guys, by each one of you. That I have evidence of that. So thank you. So, all right. On to the next. Go to the lobby.
Yep.